what's on your mind? What would you like to talk about in terms of the ET UFO topic or anything connected to that?
Well, yeah, we can talk about anything you want. I didn't watch News Nation last night. I don't know what David Grush talked about, but I know basically he's disappointed, as I think a lot of us are who are following the phenomenon and following what the government is doing. Just the lack of transparency, and ju- you know, um, what more can we say about it? It's just disheartening, but it happens. How people keep wanting to, powerful forces wanting to keep to suppress this truth. And we don't have to just talk about UFOs. We can talk about, because that goes across the board. But here again, how can we keep a lid on this thing?
Yeah.
And it's just frustrating. Um, but they've been doing it because there are people who, uh, in powerful places, that it's in the best interest not to let this get out.
hmm
For obviously for economic interest,
hmm
obviously for interest around religion and control. And we just see that happening because the United States is the most secretive government regarding this. A lot of other governments on the planet are much, much more open
hmm
to this, um, which I applaud. So I mean, that's how it is. Um, I know a lot of people are not just around this time, not around this topic, but listen, there's, we got wars. I mean, we could these wars in the Middle East and Ukraine, it can get apocalyptic really quickly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It can really, at the drop of a hat, all you need for maybe is like Turkey to come in, or Iran to come in, as far as the Middle East.
hmm
Um, and then NATO, of course, what's going on in Ukraine. It's an exciting time to be alive, and it's a concerning time to be alive. Um, and I feel excitement,
hmm
uh, because I do think people are waking up, and that the old way of doing things, people are getting it all over the planet, that we can't keep doing this anymore.
hmm
And so it's an exciting time to be alive,
hmm
but it's also frightening for a lot of people.
Right. Right. Change can be frightening, right?
Yes,
Um,
yes, especially rapid change.
yes. Yes.
And people are looking for answers. Um, sometimes they want easy answers, but people, we got election time coming up. There's
hmm
a lot of saber rattling going on.
hmm
Uh, there's a lot of talk about AI. Where's the economy going to go? Of course, the climate is always there.
hmm
Um,
I see a
it's
correlation with
fun.
in my own opinion, and just
Mhm.
looking at the bigger picture, I see a correlation between the AI having gotten to a point where in the last year, 2 years, it's like, really at that point where it could become an exponential thing. And then the ET UFO disclosure thing kind of comes at the same time. It's almost like a hypothesis I think of as like, did whatever intelligence that's out there realize like this could be a key turning point? Because AI could like this, there's a million things you could talk about AI and the dangers of it, but maybe to develop it in the right way, or maybe just people need to be aware of the full reality before we like even go there. So I kind of feel like they're related, maybe.
Well, I think they are. I think science, technology, and religion are all, and also, Anthony, does it mean to be human?
Mm,
Because AI will bring that up for us. What does it really mean to be a human being? Can you have transhumanism? Can you have some maybe technological parts in your? And then there's also the religious question: well, are we playing God and those types of things? But they're all related,
what
as
do you
you
think
said.
about all that?
Well, I'm going to tell you,
At what point does this consciousness and what we are and technology,
I don't have a great fear of AI
Mhm.
as far as pure technology. To me, it's like money. Money's not evil.
Yeah,
It's the
it's
intentionality
a
we
tool.
bring
It,
to
it
money.
can be a useful tool.
It's
right?
the
The
consciousness, and so can AI.
right,
But
which I agree.
already we're programming it with the biases that we have.
Yeah,
I think more people are afraid of people who are um, not mature enough to use the technology. That's what people are really afraid of. They'll say, well, I'm afraid of AI, but really you're afraid of, when I talk to people, that we're not mature enough, we're not evolved enough to use it equitably and fairly.
right,
And that's my concern. But it's already here. This is the way the world is going. That's one thing. Um, the other thing for me is that when I go back and I look at Plato and I go back and look at some of the creation narratives, the world has had cataclysms. We've we've civilization has been destroyed and started all over again before.
hmm,
We may be one of those civilizations. So it's not like, um, oh my God, oh my God. It's like this has happened before. No, you don't want to be on the receiving end of some type of nuclear holocaust or, some type of extinction level event,
yeah,
climate wise or anything. But it's happened before, and we always get jump started.
hmm,
And it's almost like until we learn the lessons, collectively speaking, we always face this precipice where, are we going to zig or zag? Are we going to grow up and say, the old ways are not working, or are we going to do this thing all over again and destroy ourselves? And here we are again as human beings at this place.
right. Is there? I've heard people say that this is the seventh time of that, at least in this.
I don't know how many times. I know the
Mhm,
Hopi talk about it happening several times.
mhm.
If we look at the Bible closely enough, it looks like Genesis begins with another cataclysm. Um, if you look at the Mesopotamian text, the Sumerian text, they talk about it. I don't know how many times it's happened. Plato was talking about he came up with every 5 or 6 thousand years. There's this cyclical time where we come or have destroyed something has come and wiped us out. He got that information from some Egyptian priests who said they got it from some Atlantean priests. And so, and of course, again, if you go to these narratives, you see that whether it's been a flood or what have you, that
Yeah,
our planet has had these before. And we could be at one of these points now where either we'll do it to ourselves or there will be some type of extinction level event.
mm. Who are the Atlanteans?
From my research, the Atlanteans were a civilization about 10, 12,000 years ago, highly technological, different. Edgar Casey talks about it. Obviously, Plato talks about it. A lot of people say that these were just metaphors and myths, but I think a lot of archaeology was searching for Atlantis, but it was a continent
Mm,
in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, highly technological, working with crystals and very diverse uh, um, racially, as far as at that time. It's been argued that human beings actually lived alongside extraterrestrials.
mhm,
And allegedly, there was this, again, the sons of light and darkness, this global kind of tug of war between um, people who wanted uh, to evolve, to ascend,
mm,
to explore, and a group who was just the usual suspects: greed, avarice,
right.
and destroyed themselves.
Why does that exist in the creation of the all? To put it one way.
It's an interesting thing. I think that it exists because it exists in the gods. When we look at, whether you're looking at the Titans in the Greek mythology, whether you're looking at Enki and Enlil in the Sumerian and Babylonian
Mm,
uh, legends or narratives, if you look at the biblical narratives, these gods who may have created us or had a hand in genetically engineering us and splitting the genomes and what have you, they fought among themselves.
Mm.
We have this idealized view of, these gods of being, or well, the one God, obviously, but even that, to my mind, we're talking about Yahweh. He had a lot of issues, but they fought among themselves. They committed adultery. They fought. They drank. They were all over. They loved. They were all over the place.
Yeah, their stories, those mythologies they're
Yeah,
pretty
and
bad.
these and I'm thinking that they're talking because they all came from the sky, and I think that we just learn from what we saw, like any child would do with parents.
But going a level above that, say, in a more energetic, or just in this concept of, the reality, the creation being all with this one source. Why is there sort of like bad
Brother, if I knew that, we could split
people?
the Nobel Prize money.
Yeah, but we got to speculate on it. Like
No,
what's your
I
thought
don't.
on it? That's what I want to
I
ask.
don't think we have to speculate on it.
We
I think
don't.
we
We
have
don't.
to not speculate on it so much.
Mm,
Now, I'm not talking
yeah,
about you and I. I'm thinking that,
that's a good point, though.
what is real? What is idea? We have this idealized version of the way things should be and the way the gods should act.
Mm,
But it's right there in the narratives of our ancestors. But we don't want to look at that because somehow it's like a cognitive dissonance. But
yeah,
these beings were flawed just like we were. And if we're created by them, we're flawed too.
yeah,
And so we learned about commerce, we learned about civilization, we learned about cultural things, cosmetics, we learned about how to make beer. We learned our ancestors told us that these beings came down from the sky and they kind of jump started or started civilization, but they were fighting among themselves.
right,
You had some of them who were friendly to us and were still flawed. You had some of them who wanted to see us to keep us so ignorant that we didn't even know we were naked.
yeah,
And so here we are. So this idea of having this perfect kind of wholesome thing. Now, Jesus and other teachers like him, they come along and say, "Hey, there's another entity. There's another way of doing this." But I mean, before that, we were just doing what we were programmed to do. And that's not to say that we don't have free will. I'm not saying that.
yeah.
I am saying that with free will, to me, free will means I can do whatever I want to do as long as I'm prepared to pay the consequences of it.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I,
and that's not personal. That's just the universe. You
right,
reap what you sow. It's
right,
quantum physics, and
yeah,
so
hmm,
I can. People say, "Well, what about free will?" You have free will. I can jump off this roof if that's what I want to do, but I just have to know that I'll probably wind up in the emergency room if or worse.
right, right. That makes sense. The Adam and Eve story. Do you think that it was based on a real event? And if so, what would that event? What do you think that event might have been?
I think the Adam and Eve story is based. I think all of Genesis is based on the Sumerian Enki and Enlil story.
So
Um,
what
uh,
was the garden? I've heard different speculations, like it was some kind of technology, it was like a dome, it was this or that, underground, so
Well,
I don't
yeah,
know what.
I heard it was a laboratory, but
Okay.
I don't know where it was. I mean, we can speculate that it was in the area where they're fighting a lot now in the Middle East. If you go back to Abraham, who was from Ur, who was Sumerian,
Mhm,
who's his he was familiar with those stories in Mesopotamia because they predate the Hebrew.
mhm.
So it probably was in that area. But these beings came down after what sounds like a cataclysm. They separate. The earth was null and void. I'm using the Genesis description,
Mhm.
and but the earth was already there. And when you read Genesis, well, God created this, and then the earth, and then but the earth was already there, and so they terraform. They separate the dry land from the seawater. You
Did they
separate
bring the moon in to stabilize everything? Maybe?
that has been speculated on. Um, but that's not. I mean, if you say God created the planets and what have you, we could say that. I don't know of any specific narration that talks about that
Right,
that
the
they
moon
bring it
aspect.
in, but they do kind of terraform,
Mhm.
which sounds like there was already a flood or something going on. and they kind of jumpstart civilization again.
Okay. But there had been earlier civilizations.
No question. Archaeology, even
Yeah.
if you look at Göbekli Tepe, if you look at, well, and if you look at Lemuria or Mew, Edgar Casey talked about those. So yeah, civilizations are probably way back from what we've been talking about.
Right.
But that's forbidden to talk about like it is with what we're talking about now because you have to rewrite history as we know it.
Yeah. And the Sumerian kings lists and
Well, just
all,
like the
all
Egyptian
of that.
kings list.
Yeah.
Yeah, these beings, they had to be, they couldn't have been human if they were ruling 145,000 years here, 250,000. That's not human rule. Even if you say okay, it's a legend, but still those timelines are you'd have to be non-human to have been a king that long. And you have to say why would these beings lie about that? Why
Right.
why would human beings lie about that?
Right. They had so many other advancements that we've based our civilization on, just
Hmm.
cuneiform writing,
Yes.
the 60 math,
Yeah, this, well, 60-minute hour, 60
Yeah.
minute, 60-second minute. Yeah, where
All
were
that
they
stuff.
getting this information?
Exactly.
Um, and so it's like almost everything we've been told has been. Now I don't know if people lied deliberately, but it's which is probably another reason why people don't want disclosure.
Mm.
You
Why?
know,
Because of the belief system aspect?
well, yeah, yeah. What are we doing with the technology that we have? What happened? I mean, what president is gonna come out and say to the White House and from the White House and say, "Guess what, gang? We've been lying to you for 75 plus years. Some people lost their lives because of it, because they couldn't keep secrets. I mean, who's going to do that? The only way that could work that I know of, and I've talked about this, is if we do what South Africa did with Mandela and Tutu. If we have a reconciliation, truth and reconciliation, where you write you start all over,
Hmm.
a tabla rasa. You're not going to do time. You're not going to be punished. It's not going. But we need you to tell us the truth about what was going on.
Yeah.
That's the only way that's going to work because people are not going to come out and risk their careers and their
Right.
lives and their livelihoods.
And that was not included in the bill that just passed, right? To my
Oh,
knowledge.
none of that
No.
was.
Yeah.
No, as a matter of fact, they're making it harder for whistleblowers and people in the government to come out and say, look, this is what's been going on. They're making it more difficult too.
How?
Because you have to go to a committee and they have to okay it. The
Yeah.
usual.
Yeah.
The usual.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, but I think things are moving though, and
No
I'm
question. I
curious.
do. Yeah, it's frustrating, but the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it is out of the bag.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
clean out
whatever,
now.
whatever metaphor you want. You can't put the genie back in the bottle, whatever you want to,
Yeah.
but it's out there now. And the only thing they can do is what they're doing is to keep you so distracted
Mhm.
that you don't talk about. We're so focused on Trump and his crazy, the antics, and we're so there's the saber rattling with China and Russia, and then what's going on in the
It's a big
Mediterranean.
it's a big election for the UFO
Yes,
issue because, right now Biden, it seems like he's just not even, connected to it. But if we were to get a president that actually was like, "Yeah, no, I want transparency." They have executive power that could, like, if he wanted
they
to, he
do.
could have vetoed this bill and been like, "Nope, I want the provisions that you left out." And then they would have to redo it and,
Yeah.
but he just
But he
signed it.
wants to get reelected and nobody wants to risk it.
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of tough.
Mhm.
But there are things that come out. Grush came
Right.
out. All these
And
people
now
came out,
people
so
are
they
saying
can't
that
control it.
because they didn't include those things, that more people may come forward now,
Yeah.
like another Grush. And actually, Nation hinted at that. They hinted at two things in that recent program you're referring to, where I guess they had David Grush come back for another interview 6 months later or
Yes.
whatever, and they said that he has something he's trying to get cleared through security to that's like more information about something he
Hmm.
saw firsthand or whatever. And then also that there's potentially other whistleblowers who have like way more than Grush did, and they're like maybe coming forward. Those are the rumors
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. But they've got to be protected,
Yeah,
and
right.
so they've got to be protected because these people play hardball, and they're not playing, and
Mm,
people have lost their lives over this stuff or
yeah,
livelihoods,
right.
and because it's just going to shake everything up from religion to economics to geopolitics. Um, it's going to change the world, life on this planet as we know it.
Yeah,
I mean, it already has. I mean, once you start, and I'm in the business of religion,
yeah,
and it is a business to a degree, it's also a vocation. But once you start to say, I live in a populated universe, once you start to really believe that and start to talk about that, your whole concept of what God is or isn't changes.
yeah, yeah. And I agree with you. When I've thought about it, and sometimes I talk to my wife about it, I think it's liberating to know
I do
that
too.
the world, it's not just this thing and we're
Yes.
alone, and it's like no, it's literally everywhere. There's
Yeah.
it's a better mind frame to be in than what we're conditioned into, in my opinion, now, which is like so limited and lonely. And it's like nah, it's bigger than you could ever
It's
imagine.
bigger. It's bigger. And I do. I find it liberating. I find it exciting, but I also can see why people don't.
Yeah,
And it's the usual fear factor, and especially if you're benefiting from the system
mm,
as it works now.
yeah,
And a lot of our leaders, a lot of our politicians, they benefit from this. They get money. They get money to keep their mouth shut. They get money for I was reading a meme the other day. I'm paraphrasing, but it said it's very difficult to get somebody to believe in something when their paycheck demands that they not.
yeah. For sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's cynical, it's sad, but it's true.
Yeah,
So, um, it's and it gives me a little more empathy. I mean, I get it. I get why other ministers don't talk about it
yeah,
because you can lose your livelihood. I get why
right.
professors
I mean,
and
it is
yeah,
taboo, and it's like I want to talk about it as
yeah.
a professor, and it's like I'm very cautious because
Oh yeah,
it's just still taboo, and it's like I
yeah,
feel better now because there's actual legislation. It's a real current event, and what should that shouldn't be off limits for me to talk about. So, but
yeah.
even so, I'm always a little bit wary.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I touch on it. I touch on it in my sermons once in a while, but I don't go, hey, because that's not what they hired me for, and I'm not here to make you
Right,
believe it. I can say
right,
you should do some research on it.
right.
Don't take my word for it. But there are a
Exactly.
lot of people who don't even do that.
No. What are your theories on what happens when we die with our consciousness or our experience?
Well, I'm piggybacking on other people. I actually met two people who I know did not know each other who had near death experiences. Who they were actually clinically dead, and they pretty much all say the same thing. My theory is this, and I don't even know if it's a theory anymore because, many, even early Christianity talked about life after life and reincarnation.
Mm,
That Einstein told us, consciousness is not created or destroyed; it just changes form.
mm,
Who was it? Chief Seattle. There's no death. There's only a change of worlds.
mm.
And so, I don't think all these people are lying. I think they're all telling you what they experienced, and they were conscious after death. They weren't
Yeah,
in their bodies, but they were aware. They had their personalities. They had their same thoughts and that kind of thing. And I think that it's very hard to just say, well, that's disreputable. I mean, it's hard to argue against it.
yeah.
And what's amazing to me is that we're taking so this is our ancestors. Many of them knew this already,
Oh yeah, it
and we're
was yeah.
just
We've been, but like we've unfortunately grown up with the conditioning that you
yeah
know yeah, older cultures and groups and traditions, they just like it was a granted. They knew, they
They,
communicated with the spirit world like regularly.
yes,
So it's like,
yes.
yeah.
And so, I always thought it was weird that not only the church, at least the church I came up in, but even government, they would tell you about, no, we don't, there's no psychic stuff. No,
Mhm.
that's a no, no. What are you, crazy? And then you find out that Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan are having astrologers come to the White House. And, they're telling you that we don't believe in psychic phenomenon. And then they're competing with the Russians. They're hiring psychic spies to remote view. And so I just come to the conclusion that a lot of this stuff that we were doing, uh, and then it got regulated and got taboo, uh, was just that the powers that be didn't want us to have that, didn't want us to. Well, you even see it in the Popol Vuh and the Mesoamerican stories. You see it in the Bible, even these extraterrestrials. And I keep bringing it back to that.
Mm.
But even some of them were like, we don't want them to become like us.
Yeah.
We just want them to go get me a cup of coffee. Go do this. We don't want that because you what happens? It's hard to control you.
Yeah.
It's hard to rule you when you become like us. What does the serpent say to Eve? This person, which I don't believe was God, so, they don't want you to, they don't want you to know what they know.
Mm.
So, okay, so it's a serpent, so it may be a reptilian, whatever it is. And so all that baggage comes, and so it's evil. But this person, when I go back and look at it now, this person was actually trying to help. No, they're BSing you.
Mm.
They don't want you to become like them. And you see it now. The powers that be, I don't care whether it's the Queen in England or what have you, we want to keep the masses from being like us.
Yeah.
We don't want them knowing what we know. We don't want them to have the power and the influence. It's just the whole story of humankind has been that.
Yeah.
And you get some people who come, the Jesuses of the world, or the Buddhas, or Joan of Arc, or these enlightened people. They come and go. Wait a minute, we don't. No, we want to empower you. No, you don't need someone who. And then unfortunately, they get beat up or killed or whatever, and then we go back to sleep for a while, and then someone else comes, and now the information is out there. You don't need a savior. You just need to study and to spend time in nature and cultivate that within yourself. But powers that be don't want a populace that's educated. We don't want that. That's why when dictators go into other countries, who do they kill? Who do they banish? The intellectuals, the artists, because they're troublemakers.
Yeah.
They're troublemakers. I don't want you thinking for yourself. I don't want that. I don't want the creativity. No, I want automatons. I want you to do what I want you to do and to follow this hierarchy. And that's you'll be fine. We'll take care of you if you stay within these parameters.
But I think that the turning point is in motion. I think that
Mm-hmm.
we're on the ascension path as a
Mm-hmm.
humanity. I do believe that. And
Yeah, a
and
new
I
world.
mean there's evidence to support that too. I mean, we have come a
Well, yeah,
long way,
a new
you know.
world is being born, but
Yeah.
it's that difficult time between I'll be talking about it, the Advent. What is that? Okay, yes, it's the preparing for the birth of Jesus. If you're in the Christian tradition, we know something's coming, but it's also bringing it to a more universal thing because everybody doesn't believe that. But it's the tension between what is and what's not yet.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's that tension between the world that we know it
Mm.
and a new world that's coming.
Mm.
And so it's like letting go of the trapeze, and you're in the middle, and you're waiting for the trapeze to come before you can grab it. You've just let go of this, and now you're waiting for this to come. This is what this time of year is about. Whether you're talking about solstice, whether you're talking about the birth of the Mashiach or the Messiah, that's where we are.
Mhm.
It's always that tension: the person I am and the person I want to become. And how do I navigate that? How do I negotiate that tension?
Mm. So you mentioned the Messiah, the Mashiach.
Yeah.
What exactly is that? Is it? I know it probably has different interpretations or meanings, but what does it really represent? Is it literally the expectation that this being will come back at some point, or what's your take on
Yeah,
it?
yeah, it is. It is. And I don't even know if it's a comeback,
Hmm.
but I know if you look at the Hindu, I think they were the brother's name is Kahil or Khalil. If you look at Viking in the Norse tradition, obviously, if you look at the three monotheistic religions, if you look at the Hopi um, uh, tradition, there is a being coming from out there who brings in a a time of peace, a time of what we would call a utopia, and and it's always after a time of great turmoil,
Hmm.
always, or a cataclysm. These beings come and they jump this, or this being comes and saves us from ourselves, or saves some remnants, and we start all over again with a higher consciousness.
Mm.
Somehow we've changed. And what fascinates me, because I was of the mind, and I still am, for me, to me, people who said that, I was like, so you're just putting an overlay here. You're putting an overlay here. So instead of God, you don't believe in God anymore. So you're going to say an extraterrestrial is going to come save us.
Hmm.
But that's, to me, you're just switching. You're just switching characters in the story.
Right.
And they said, no, Michael. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but then, and this was very recently. This is not just you. I went back and I started looking at this. The Hindus. I started looking at Christianity and Islam, and they're all telling Native American the narrative. They're all saying the same thing. Are all these people off the wall? Are all these people lying? Are all these people delusional? All these cultures? No. And these people are, and they're saying this is something that's going to happen in the future, which could be where we're living now, where we've got all these problems, we've got all these issues, and we're on the verge of destroying ourselves or being destroyed. And this being comes along in Hinduism. Forget the brother's name, in Islam. Jesus comes back in the Christian religion, in the Norse religion. It's always, I'm like, well, something's going on, that all of these people are having this same prophecy, just like all of them talk about a flood. All these cultures talk about a flood and beings coming down. Are they all delusional?
Mm.
Maybe there's something to this. I still won't live my life like I can act a fool and carry on and someone will come up and clean up after me. Because that's not what consciousness is about, at least in my mind.
Hmm.
But we could see that happening.
Right.
You know, the Catholic Church is preparing for, well, they're going to talk about Jesus. People critique it and say, well, they're talking about an extraterrestrial savior, which technically, if you go by my line of reasoning, Jesus was part extraterrestrial. But there's someone coming from outside who is supposed to kind of help us dial this stuff back a bit.
So that could represent not just one being, though. It could represent an energy. It could come in different forms. It could
Well,
it
these
could
people,
represent a whole race or a group of beings that are
it could,
extraterrestrial.
it could, but
Okay.
these people, but these stories are talking about a being,
Okay.
one person.
Do you think that's because they were helping that sort of area? And
No, I just think that our ancestors were obviously colonized. I say obviously, and they left these messages for us about we're not alone in the universe, that we need to be able to deal with that. And again, that some of these beings were, um,
so
mischievous.
how did they suppress that knowledge from the get go? Because we're left with like the clues and the inferences from all the ancient texts, but at one point it was like recent history. So how did that all get?
Well, if I'm looking at my notes from the Hebrew religion in the sixth and seventh century BCE, King Hezekiah and his grandson was Josiah. I may have them mixed up, but they went, and the Bible talks about this. They went and tore down all the altars and all the monuments to people like Asherah and Dagon and Baal because they were Yahwists,
Mhm.
as was Moses.
Right.
And so they tore, and Asherah is one of the beings, she has different names in different cultures, but she was one of the beings who taught human beings how to make beer, how to start civilization, what plants were good to eat for consciousness, what plants were good, what plants were poisonous. You look in the book of Enoch, these beings taught us about culture, astronomy, astrology, but Yahweh wasn't having it. So, but when these kings came to power,
Can I ask you real quick?
yeah,
Do you think Yahweh was a one of the Sumerian gods, like Enlil or anyone in that family or that
yeah, they just
drama?
had different names. If you look at Deuteronomy 32:8, you will see that Yahweh, and if you probably have to put the name Elohim in, that Yahweh was given Palestine.
Okay.
He was given Palestine. So a God is not given any land. And usually when you get the land, you get the people in it.
Hmm.
Deuteronomy 32:8, if you read that chapter. So here you have what we have is our modern day hierarchy. When King Josiah and Hezekiah, I think that's his grandfather, they said we're destroying all that. There's going to be one temple, that's going to be Jerusalem. There's going to be one God, which is Yahweh. There's going to be one high priest. And so now you start to see the beginnings of a hierarchy.
And before that, throughout the world, most places, peoples, they had a system of many gods, or they had nature and
Because there were many,
worship.
because there were many
Yeah,
gods.
like so there was really there might be like one or two examples of something akin to a monotheism, but not really. The whole
No,
world was polytheistic.
yeah, early Judaism was polytheistic. And then when they became monotheistic, not only did they become monotheistic, they became patriarchal. So they got rid of the female element. And what do you gain when you why would you do that?
Hmm.
But again, my point being is
And
that
that
then you
happened
start to see
everywhere in
the
the
hierarchy.
civilized
Yes,
world.
yes. Well, as we if
Empires
you look
and
at the yeah, you look at the Cherokee. I mean, they were a matriarchal society, and then when they came into European society, not only did they take on Christianity, the Orthodox Christianity, but the men started to be um, the rulers of the clans and that kind of thing.
hmm.
And so here we have what we have today.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
is centralized. You saw it in Constantinople, what with Constantine in Rome. Okay, Christianity is now the state religion, and so this is so this is the dogma we're going to have. There's a Trinity. Mary did not have sex. Jesus is God, and here's the hierarchy. There's the emperor. There's the God. There's God. There's the emperor and the priest, right? And then you have your senators and you have your legislators, and then you have priests, and then you have the ordinary people, and there's that pyramid there. So everything now is consolidated.
Hmm.
All the shekels will go to Jerusalem now. That's where the temple is. It's just easier to govern. There's one priest. There's one God. There's one king. Much easier to manage and control.
Right. The empires and sort of starting war in the name of religion became the central theme of world history for a long time after that. And yeah, it's still, something people are still killing each other over religion today,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is just which is wild.
And we see that because of what we saw the gods do.
Hmm.
That's what we saw them do. We saw them fight among themselves, and so here we have, uh, uh, and so that's why it's hard for people to wrap their minds around. that this is human history. We've been taught something totally different.
Yeah, so and that was intentional from the gods from the beginning of the modern civilization era, starting like roughly 4,000 years BC with the Sumerians and onward. It was kind of like that was the knowledge of really the deeper truths
Yeah, they were fighting.
was
Yeah,
not in the
and, and
education.
and that's what we saw them do. If you look at Daniel 10:13, they don't name the angel,
Mm-hmm.
but it's right there. The angel comes to assist Daniel, and he says, "I've been trying to get to you for 3 weeks, but I'm fighting the prince of Persia. So Michael had to come to relieve me so I could bring you this message." So they're fighting, and people are taking sides. Now you have human beings fighting with the king of Persia and
Mm-hmm.
following one angel, extraterrestrial, Michael, who's a protector, who's a warrior. He comes in.
You were saying how it consolidates everything with the
Yeah.
monotheism and then those empires that were all monotheistic afterwards. It also gave them an excuse to initiate, you know, just taking over places with violence. Like the Manifest Destiny is one example in the 1800s in the
Well,
United States, and just
well,
inflicting violence in the name of saying you have a divine right to like civilize people. And so they used that in like Roman times to just conquer. They used it in that time as well. And
well, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. If you're God, because Yahweh was doing the same thing, right? So if your God believes in genocide, then you have to believe in
yeah,
genocide. If your God believes that these are my people and these aren't, then you have to believe that because you have to justify that. And there's no accident that that's what's going on. The people fighting in the Middle East, they all believe in Yahweh. It's an eye for an eye. It's an eye for an eye. Yeah, it's right. It's right there in the texts. It's right there in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's right there in the Bible. It's right there in the in the New Testament. It's right there in the Quran. So we're in this, and so we were okay. These people, this angel and human beings were fighting the king of Persia. So Michael has to come along, relieve this guy, so Michael can fight. So this guy can go and give Daniel a message. Well, who you think's fighting for each other? They got human beings fighting. This is my God. This is your God. And it's been going on since time. And that's the legacy that they left. When these beings left, they had hybrids, right? Some of them had sons. And so those are the demigods. We call them hybrids. And so now they're gone. So it's a second wave there. So after the king's list is gone, now they got these other people. So what are they going to do? They're going to rule like like their ancestors did. And you have human beings. So when they leave some offspring, but when they leave, they say, Michael, you've served me well. You are going to be the high priest. So how do I know how to rule? By seeing how they ruled. By seeing how they ruled. And so it just goes on, generation after generation. Now, if I'm a benevolent king or queen, and maybe my predecessor was, then maybe I'll keep that. But if I don't see that, I want to be like the gods, man. I want to be like them. So I'm going to rule like them.
mm, yeah. And it's always a very interesting correlation in history. All of these rulerships in many different cultures, places in the world, empires, kingdoms, countries, that their right to rule was given to them by divine order,
Mm-hmm.
which would like line up with the idea that there was probably early or possibly the early hybrid, and then you did have part blood that was
Yeah,
whatever,
I'm a
right?
blue blood. I have the divine right of kings
Mm,
because I can trace my ancestry
right,
back to those times.
right,
I mean, that's what David Icke was talking about. I don't subscribe to everything he says,
right.
and I used to think he was a nut, but he got that part right, I think. And it's the divine right. Blue bloods. I'm a divine. I can trace. I mean, the average person maybe can trace their ancestors back a couple generations, but these people have this power. Whether it's true or not, they say I can trace it back to the kings and queens of yesteryear. And where do you think they got their stuff from? From these beings.
Yeah.
It's my divine right. It's my right to rule over.
What what's just interesting you the most now in what you read about and what you're studying, the questions you're trying to answer? Like
Yeah, yeah, boy, yeah, yeah, I love it. I love your questions. They're just no, I do. I'm reading a lot. I'm going back and rereading because what I'm sharing with you, my brother, is this is stuff that I am recently letting in. I wouldn't let this in. Your question was you asked about what you believe about free will, right? And I did a lot of thinking about that. But what I just told you a year ago, year and a half ago, I couldn't accept that um, that we were so heavily influenced by these beings because I thought that it was like saying, "Oh, the devil made me do it."
mhm,
You know, I don't have to take responsibility for it. But there's some truth to this. Going back and looking over these verses I just told you about because they were hidden in plain sight. So I'm going back and rereading some of that stuff, rereading the Bible again. I'm rereading another book by R.A. Boulay, Boulay. It's called Flying Serpents and Dragons, Reptilians and Serpents in Humankind's History. Because some of these beings they look scary, but some of them were very benevolent.
yeah,
Some of them are in the Epic of Gilgamesh.
yeah,
So I'm going back and reading that. The Gods of Eden. I'm reading a lot about the Catholic Church because even though I was not raised Catholic, there's still a lot of things. The dogma, the theology, I can't get to. I love Gregorian chants. I love the ritual.
mm,
Uh, um, but they seem to be the only church in the United States that's actively talking about this since 2009.
yeah,
So I've been reading about the history of Catholic thought on extraterrestrials because Protestantism seems not to go there. Of course, Dr. Barry Downing, myself, but I'm rereading and read. Those are new things I'm reading um, about the popes and how they. I'm just reading a one. I'm finishing. Well, I'm halfway through. It's about extraterrestrial thought in the Catholic Church
mm.
from uh, before Descartes' time up until the present. It's a fascinating
Oh,
book.
wow, cool.
And I read I try to catch up on my Deep Space Nine stuff. I read the little
What's that?
paperbacks there.
What's Deep Space Nine?
Star Trek,
Yeah,
Deep.
I've never seen it. Can you believe that?
It's one. Oh, I can believe it because I never watched Star Trek till about 4 years ago.
None of the, like, science
Any
fiction
Star Trek.
space stuff, I've never
Yeah,
watched it. I never thought
yeah.
much about
Oh,
flying saucers
I
was,
just
like, a cool, like, art thing to me. I'm like, for the '50s, like, Twilight Zone's cool. Never thought about it as, like, meaning anything much on my reality, and then it was
it's
like,
there, brother. It's there.
boom.
I've been reading that. And well, I got some books coming in around that. I've been reading some books on like great diplomats. I'm not a big fan of Kissinger, but I'm going to delve into that thick book, Diplomacy. I'm
About
reading
Kissinger?
about Kissinger, yeah, his book on
There's some
diplomacy.
rumors are that I've read from some books that he was, like, pretty bad,
Yeah, yeah,
that
definitely,
dude.
definitely. But I'm curious about his book on diplomacy. What's the brother Kofi Annan? I got a book on him about his tenure at the UN as a diplomat. I'm fascinated with diplomats, how they kind of walk that line. Um, so I read a lot of stuff like that. Probably um, the lightest thing I've been reading is these Star Trek novels, this Deep Space Nine. I like reading about that.
Nice. I always remember in our first conversation, you were saying, like, you're just always reading, so,
I am. I
I'm
am. I'm
like that
always.
too, So that's
I'm
why I was
always reading.
just wondering.
Yeah. Now I have an outlet, to collect
But,
the stuff.
yeah, I guess that's my point too, is, like, I used to there it's only been recently too, right? The last year maybe, where I really, because 'cause I'm like, I'm spending this time reading all this, I wanna share it,
Hmm.
'cause why not? And so I'm like, I, like, force myself to take notes and to annotate and this and that, so, like, I can actually go back then summarize the information and then like share it. Which I only reason I do it is because I enjoy it, and I think that sharing what I'm learning about for myself is it just resonates for me. So,
And
but
you got the perfect outlet for it because you have a podcast.
yeah, it is in a sense. It is because it's just amazing to talk to people like you and hear your perspectives, and that's a whole nother thing. It's something I could never get from reading a book. You know what I mean?
I think 20, I think, and I'm not the only one, I just think that from 2024 on, this is going to be the topic and it will slowly gravitate to the mainstream.
Yeah,
You know, but this is going to be it.
it is, and I know intuitively and from my life experience because the way my life's been so far. And I was telling my wife this. I've always been a little bit ahead of the,
Head of
like
the
like
curve.
like when I started meditating in like 2008 or whatever, 2006. Everybody thought I was like the weirdest person, meditating with and now it's like it's cool to meditate. All of these
Mhm.
things where I was, so and then I see I've lived that. I've lived it where everybody's on that. Oh, everyone knows that now. When in the time it was like I was the weird one for
Hmm.
thinking it or studying it or whatever. So I do agree with you. I think that it will be. It will be, and yeah, it concerns me slightly because I want to make sure people do a real job of the history of it and the facts about it because there's a lot of information out there, and it's a tricky topic to do good history on because there's
Hmm.
disinformation, there's this and that. It's like you're working with different levels of evidence, and but you if you piece it all together, you see that there's a clear story to how
Hmm.
things happened, got covered up, and here we are today. And
Yep. Yep.
you know,
Yep. And then you just keep growing and learning. Like I said, a lot of the stuff I'm talking to you about, probably 2 years ago, I wasn't there.
yeah,
I wasn't there. But I just read and I listened and I started feeling, hey man, this is on to something. I mean, it just makes
it's
sense.
a cool experience to have, right? Like I
Yeah.
wasn't expecting it. I literally heard a reference to that to the Philip Corso book, and I was like, wait, really? This guy was a lieutenant colonel, and he said all this, and then I read the book, and I was just like, wow. And then that was the beginning of the trail, and then it's like
Right.
there's so
Yep.
much, there's so much evidence out there in
I
what
know.
people
And
have
I'm going to go
written,
back.
documents. Yeah,
I'm going to go back and reread that book. And then what's really intriguing to me is that, what was it, a year, 2 years later, he was dead.
yeah. Yeah, and actually now I see you probably know of Jeremy Corbell,
Hmm.
and he's kind of a more prominent known person. The media uses him a lot, whatnot. But he just recently, him and George Knapp, which I think George Knapp is great. I do, and I don't have a problem with Jeremy Corbell either. I just think it's interesting how he's been like propped up as like a person for the media to talk to. I'm always a little wary of that, but I do think that he has good intentions from what I can tell. But anyway, George Knapp I like, and they have a podcast called Weaponized, and they just recently, like a few days ago, I think, we're talking about the Corso book
Hmm.
story, and Knapp had some old tapes of interviews with him, so they were playing those, I guess, talking about him. I haven't seen it, but he's an interesting one. He's people have said that not everything in the book was 100% true, but again, the same main facts about it and some of the interesting things, like that's how we got a starting point to figure out fiber optics was from the
Hmm.
crash debris. Like he had this file where it was just like random gadgets. He brought them to the
Hmm.
best
Night
scientific
vision, night
industries.
vision
Yeah,
goggles, all that
the
technology.
laser.
Yeah. Yeah. And nothing is actually 100% true.
Yeah,
And you
right,
don't want to let the perfect get in the way of the good.
right, exactly. And that's one of the fallacies actually that I teach in one of my classes is
Hmm.
just because there's partial information or just because the credibility of something's not 100%, then you can't submit it. You know what I mean? It's like
Yep.
the either or fallacy. If it's not like 100% there, then none of it's true.
Right.
Which
And
is
that's, you don't want to get caught up into that. What's the other way of putting it is, um, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
exactly.
Yeah.
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 So it's It's been nice. It's been nice just letting this conversation go where it wanted to go today. Thanks
All right, brother.
for coming on again.
Listen, be safe, and it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful 2024.
Thank you.
We will talk, brother.
I appreciate that. You too.
All right. All right. Take care.
All right. Bye,
Bye
Michael.
bye.